All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to one of my more in-depth videos. Usually my videos aren't pretty structured, so today I'm going to try to change that up a bit. I'm going to do a very in-depth video about controller artifacts. There's going to be timestamps in the description, but if you really are interested in learning more about it, just watch the entire video. I'm going to go over a couple of things. Both subjective and objective things. There's a couple of things I've tested out and a couple of facts I've gathered from other people, which I will mention when needs be. And there's also going to be my opinions as to how it all works. Now, if you are going to watch this video, I'd suggest you to be a bit comfortable with how controlling works and basically how it works, what your role is, because I'm not going to go over all of that. I'm specifically going to go in depth into the artifacts. Now, I was originally going to make this video a video about like how controller artifacts aren't as good as healer, tank, or DPS artifacts, and I still am convinced that controller artifacts are on the weaker side. But doing some testing, I have kind of found out that there are some interesting sides to this. So anyways, what I'm going to do first is talk about each individual artifact itself. Now, I've chosen these 6. There is technically other options. I have seen people run Eye of the Gemini, and there's also people who run the Entwined Wings of Azar or something. I'm not entirely sure how that's called, but I don't think neither of those is anywhere near viable or compares to these 6. So yep, I'm gonna jump into each one, and I'll see you in the next segment. As I should have mentioned, is I'm gonna go over 120 artifacts and 200 artifacts. I'm gonna compare those two, and I'll go in depth as to the differences. Basically, why? I think if you want to troll at a high level, you need to at least have 120 artifacts. You could do it with 80s, but I think 120 is like kind of the sweet spot where you don't have to put money or as much money into it, but you still have somewhat viable artifacts. And you'll mainly see that in the stats, which I'll get into specifically. So we're going to start off with the Amulet of Ra, which is basically a debuff artifact. It doesn't do anything about your power or anything else. It just does debuffs. Now, I'm going to compare the stats first of all. I have a 120 and a 200 here, although it does say that it's at rank 139. That is because I have yet to break it through, so it technically still is. Well, I mean, the stats are going to be a bit higher because it's not at 120 anymore, but the percentage stats are going to be the same. So the main difference to note here is that at 120, you get 4% vit and 2% power, and at rank 200 you get 5% vit and 4% power. Now, stat wise, is it worth getting a 200 over a 120? No, it's not. 1% vit, literally, like the amount of money or time you have to put into getting this to 200 just for the 1% vit and the 2% power is not worth it. And when it comes to base stats, you go from 1500 to almost 5000 power, which is it's pretty good, and you go from 180 vit to 500 vit. Now the vit isn't big, it's like a 300 difference, when in the long run you're going to have about 25 to 30k vit. That is at around the 300 CR. I have lower vit here because I just well, this is test server. Power wise, it is good to have what is it? What difference is it? 3.5-ish? But still, in the long run, getting a 200 artifact for that is not worth it. So, first of all, if you're going to get the Amulet of Ra, don't get it to 200 for the stats. And I'm going to look into the debuffs themselves. I'm going to start off with the additional enemies hit, because that is the easiest to explain. Basically put, if you're fighting a set of ads, let's say there's a couple of ads here, when you do a regular debuff, well, let's take a heal debuff, it's gonna just debuff that one enemy. Even if you have a debuff that hits multiple targets, like for example Hard Light's Light Blast, it'll still only debuff the one target that you have selected. even though it's hitting multiple, if you don't have the artifact. As soon as you equip it, it's gonna hit more. So if it's at level 80, it's gonna hit 2 in total. If it's at level 120, it's gonna hit 3 in total, 5 in total for 160, and 8 in total for 200. It's a nice thing to have, but as I'll get into like what the debuffs themselves do, it's not really worth it either, because, well, I'll explain. Basically, what it says right here is that your debuffs are 20 to 50% stronger, but that only means in total you're going to do 2 to 5% extra damage if they have a tank debuff on, or you're only going to debuff them for an extra 2 or 5% of the damage that they will do. Why? Because regular controller debuffs only do, well, the damage in a tank debuff is 10% and the healing debuff I think is 25, but you just don't have to care about a healing debuff. Like, there's basically no content where having a healing debuff is necessary anymore. So now these are stats from Obsidian Chill, so I am going to quote him on that. I did not come up with that myself, but basically when let's take the 200 for example. When you have a 10% defense debuff, which is basically the most important one because your group is going to be able to burn the boss quicker, you're going to get 50% of that 10, which makes it 15 in total, which makes it only 5% stronger, or only gives you a 5% increase. So if you really do the numbers, I feel like the artifact itself says it's 50% stronger, but it doesn't actually feel that way. So again, I'm kind of advocating for only getting this at 120. There's not really a necessity in getting it to 200. If you do have it at 200, it's good, because technically you are going to burn the boss 2% quicker compared to a 120, because you go from a 3 to 5% extra. Plus, another good thing is that if you're debuffing a boss, you're also going to debuff the ads around them. But then again, it's not that necessary. Your group's going to survive anyway. That's the Amulet of Rao. Let's jump over to the Parasite Power Harness. Okay, that brings us to the next artifact, which is going to be the Parasite's Power Harness. Now, basically this artifact itself is kind of the reason I wanted to make this video in general, is because I think a lot of people overestimate what this artifact does, or don't fully understand how weak it is compared to what they think, which is basically overestimating. So basically it does two things. Actually, no, let's do stats first. When it comes to stats, I think they are the same as... Oh, they're not. Ooh. Well, oh no, wait, never mind. That's because... Okay, no, so apparently they do have... Okay, it does have more... Okay, honestly, I'm not going to compare those. Anyway, a 120 Parasite gives you 4% Vit, 2% power, just like the Amulet of Ra does, and a 200 gives you 5% Vit and 3% power, which, ooh, big difference here. That's a 1% power, although I say big difference, it really isn't. So when it comes to base stats, or percentage stats, the Amulet of Ra is better, but it doesn't really matter. But yeah, the passive. There's two things to this. First of all, hitting an enemy with a controller debuff grants you and up to 7 group members power equal to of your vitalization. And, well, okay, I'm going to get into the prec in a second. Now, a lot of people, I think, interpret this as whenever I use a debuff, I'm going to get raw power back. So let's say, let's say I'm out of power. I use a debuff, it's going to give me a set amount of power. That's not how it works. I don't know if a lot of people think that is how it works, but what it does is it gives you power stats. It's going to increase this stat right here. Let me show you. So I got the one. Wait, actually, I don't have any of them on right now. Let's put the let's put the 120 on. So currently I'm sitting at power of 49k. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 1 debuff, 2 debuff, 3 debuff. And then we're going to just look at the stats. So right now, 54k with 3 debuffs, 52 with 2, 50 without, and 49. Oh, sorry, 50 with 1 and then 49 without. So the only thing this artifact does for your power is increase your base power. Your base, like, I don't necessarily know how to explain this, but having higher base power isn't gonna help when you are having power issues, because you're never gonna get to that max potential of power. So what's the point in having a higher power pool if you're low on power anyway? Like, it's kind of counterintuitive, and I'm not entirely sure how to explain it. But it doesn't necessarily help those who are having power issues. The only way it works is if you manage to apply your 3 debuffs before your power hungry DPS per se, or let's say, starts using his stuff, and you keep up your debuffs, then yes, he's gonna have a higher power pool, and maybe he's gonna be able to cast 1 more ability, but that's not gonna make a big difference. But then the most important part about this is the increase in precision, which is, I think, what makes the artifact somewhat viable. And I'm going to talk about artifact combinations later on, and this is where the Parasite's power harness actually gets its value. So basically, you give the entire group precision equal to your visualization. Now, regularly, let's say you're gonna have like 25 to 30k vit. So whatever precision increase I am getting is gonna be a bit higher on live, because you're gonna have higher vit. So let's look at that real quick. Again, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna apply my debuff slowly so that we can see the difference. Okay, so with 3 debuffs, we have 18k prick. 2 makes it, okay, well, there's what I think that was a 700 difference, and then yeah, okay, I gotta replay that because I'm not entirely sure. The point is, you're not gonna get as much prick. Now, you could say every bit helps, but then again, when you are damaging and your precision, like getting maybe 1k prick extra doesn't really matter all too much. You're basically like not gonna do, well, you're not gonna do much more damage in the long run. It's mostly your critical attack chance that's gonna matter. But anyway, basically this artifact, there's 2 uses for it. 1 for the base fit, because at 120 it gives you 4%, and 2 to buff a precision group, but we're gonna get into that later. Also, one other thing I would like to mention, and as I've mentioned earlier, if you want to get the full potential out of this, you're gonna need to use 3 debuffs, because what you can't do is you can't just spam 1 debuff 3 times. That's only gonna give you 1 stack. You need to have damage, heal. Oops, I didn't hit. Let me retry that. You need to have all your debuffs. Why is it not? Wait, okay, that's weird. My debuffs aren't going off for some reason. Oh, there we go. You need to have all 3 debuffs on just to get the max value. And as I've mentioned, healing debuffs aren't necessarily good anymore. There's not really a point in having them anymore, because barely any boss heals without a mechanic. Like if there's bosses who heal, like for example, if you're running Fire and Brimstone, what's his face? Jimmy Olsen's gonna heal, but you have to do a mechanic to stop him from healing. Your healing debuff isn't gonna change that mechanic, so it's not gonna matter at all. So that's one thing. Yeah, that's the one thing I'd like to note, is you have to use a heal debuff to make it necessary, to make it at its full potential, and healing debuffs aren't good anymore. So kind of counterintuitive, but yeah, we'll get into this a bit later as well. Okay, and that brings us to our last, what I like to call easy to explain / not too complicated artifact, because the last 3 have a lot more of interactions that I'm gonna have to talk about. So yeah, saving myself. Anyway, we're gonna talk about the Scrap the Soul Cloak. And at first sight, basically, it looks like it's not a controller artifact, but in my humble opinion, it's honestly one of the best controller artifacts. Now, why isn't it a controller artifact per se? is because it doesn't have any vitalization. It doesn't have base fit, or it doesn't have percentage fit, which means that, let's say you're running these two, or let's say you're running these two, you get 10% vit. You chuck a soul cloak in there, you get like 10% vid for 3 artifacts. Whereas if you put your Parasite, your Raw, and let's say your Bob comlink, you're gonna get 15. So you're missing out on 5% vit if you're running scrap over. Let me just make sure. Yeah, over Bob comlink, or you're losing 4% if you run it over strat card. But yeah, we'll get into that later. So why is it important? Basically, every controller power has a 50% supercharge that gives you a ton of power back. And as much as I think any controller would like to admit he doesn't have power issues, this is basically your saving grace. It's basically a stronger POT for your entire team. And the main reason you would use this is when, let's say, your healers are out of power and, you know, a big hit is coming, or when you yourself are just out of power and you want to restock so you can apply your debuffs again. But I don't think you should be able to, or you should control without having that 50% supercharge. It's just so necessary. So that's why Scrap the Soul Cloak helps. What it basically does is increases your super generation. So at level 120, you get 24% extra supercharge generation, which means that, let's say supercharge costs 5k. Let's say one ability, if I use Anomaly, okay, that's a bad example. If I use Time Shift, I think that's what it's called. Let's say if I use this, it gives me 1000 without Soul Cloak, and if I equip Soul Cloak, it's gonna give me 1240 because it gives me 24% increased supercharge generation. Now at 200, it's only a 3% increase. So that's not necessarily huge. And for, well, the second part of this is basically the cooldown is going to be shorter, but in general, that's not going to matter all too much. I personally haven't ran into that issue where I have to use the supercharge like within the 30 seconds I first used it. So it's nice to have reduced cooldowns on it, but it's not necessary. And also you only get a 2.5 for 160 and for 200 increase. The big difference is at 200 you get you basically get your extended supercharge tactical mod, but without having the mod. So I'm actually going to show you this in action. So I hope everyone knows where my supercharge meter is, but if you don't, top left, this is currently full. Now I'm going to use it. It's going to go down to about halfway, and when it does, it's going to go up again because I'm going to get 7% back. So just keep an eye on that. Bam. You saw that? It's small, but again, it helps. Like every bit helps. I think I'm missing something here, aren't I? Oh yeah, what I forgot to mention is you also get extra supercharge. Oh god, how do I explain this? Basically, damn, okay. Basically, if you have the scrap at a high level, you are gonna be able to have max supercharge even though this bar isn't completely filled up. So if you don't have the scrap, you're gonna need it to be filled all the way till up here. Like this thing needs to be completely orange. Whereas if you have your scrap at 200, you only need it like about here. You can still farm more, but you can already do 10,000 supercharge. So basically, in the long run, you're gonna have more supercharges. That's basically the easiest way for me to explain it. But yeah, that Scrap the Soul Cloak is pretty easy. It's not that difficult, and it is a very good artifact simply because you need to use your 5000% power back supercharge. On to the next one. All right, moving on to the next artifact, and now we're kind of entering the the artifacts that take a tad bit more explaining to do. They're a little more complicated. But yeah, so the BOP comlink. First of all, when it comes to stats, it gives you 4% VIT at wait, actually 4%, yeah, 4% VIT at 120, 5% VIT at 200. But the big difference between the BOP comlink and, for example, the Amulet of Ra and the Parasite's power harness is that it doesn't give any base power or percentage power as a stat. Which just, it won't matter all too much in the long run, but it's interesting to note. Now, instead of power, it gives you dominance, which makes sense because this is a debuff artifact, and the power of your debuffs has to do with dominance. So at rank 120, what it gives you is the passive that you get. You can do the reduced. Jesus. Okay, English. Wait, let me try this again. It gives you two debuffs in one ability, basically. The defense and healing debuff, which is good even at level 80. Having a defense buff is pretty much the most important one. But the thing is, you wouldn't want it at level 80 because you can just have the regular debuff. There's no point in having it. You also get the benefit of, if you have the 3 debuffs on the enemy, every time you hit that enemy, you'll get power. So I'm gonna quickly show you what that does, basically. So right now at 120, it gives me a defense and a damage debuff, which means that all I really need to use to get the 3 debuffs is my anomaly. So like if I just use this, right, there's 2 debuffs, but I don't really get extra power from, wait, let me actually go to the combat log. Okay, let me do that again. I don't get power from the artifact itself. Whereas if I, actually let me drain a bit more power. If I use anomaly as well, oh wait, what? Hello? What happened? Wait, why is it only applying, that's odd. Okay, let me do that. Oh no, duh, I have to apply a damage debuff. Okay, see, that's where I messed up. So I don't need to use anomaly, I need to use a war barrage. There we go, I'm gonna put that here. And as soon as I do that, 3 debuffs, I get that little boost. Oh, I'm already full power. Okay, this is gonna be hard to show. I'm actually gonna spam abilities real quick. You see that 86? It says it here as well. The BOB comlink. So it's a very tiny amount of power you get from applying debuffs, which personally makes it less viable for me. I'll actually show you how it looks at 120 as well, just to show you how much power you get. So at 120, obviously I have the 3 debuffs, so I only really need to use the 1 ability, and I get about, okay, let me actually spam abilities. Why am I getting full power? Okay. Alright, so for 183, which still isn't much, but in the long run it kind of adds up. Alright, so a couple things to note with this. It does actually give supercharge generation. So when it first came out, I don't have it right here. Obsidian Chill made a video on this, and I'm not entirely sure if in the video he said that it gives less supercharge generation or no supercharge generation, but as you can see right here, oh wait, hold up. Yeah, it does actually slowly give you supercharge generation. Something that you should note as well is the power cost, which kind of makes it more worthwhile, because you're using 300 power to use 3 debuffs, whereas that regularly would take 600 because each ability takes 200. But debuffs last for 12 seconds, whereas the bird splits debuffs will only last for 6 seconds. So that's another trade-off you gotta keep in your mind. Now, obviously, this synergizes really well with the Parasite power harness, so that's one thing I'm going to note now. I'm also going to go over this later, specifically on how to combo, but you can basically keep applying debuffs, which will keep this precision buff up. You just have to work it into your loadout. So generally speaking, if you have Bird's Blitz, you can do more of a damaging troll build. All right, for the Claw of Elkhunt, this is a tad bit confusing in my opinion, because basically, if you really want to use it to its fullest potential, if you really want to combo it with the right artifacts, you need to have it at 200. Why? Because of the 5% critical chance. But actually, I'll get into that in a second. Just to compare stats real quick, at 120 you get 4 health, 2% power, 2% might. At 200 you get 5% health, 4 power, 3 might. The big thing is you don't get any vitalization from this, which is something that you do really want to have. Because if you're gonna synergize this with other artifacts that also don't have vitalization, you're gonna have low POT and just low power outage. Power out. Just to be clear, when it says while in control roll your group weapon buff, that is actually just your instant power. So instead of that, like if you use it, it's gonna burst a ton of power to 3 other group members. I do believe it's 3. You increase the weapon attack damage with the highest. Wait, hold up. Yeah. So 3 people in your group are gonna get a ton of power. That's gonna go away. They're not gonna get that burst of power, but you're gonna get a ton of other stats for it. First of all, you're gonna get 7% might, resto, dom for your entire team. If you do have it at level 200, you're gonna get that 5% crit chance. That means healers are gonna crit, damage is gonna crit, you're gonna crit. It's not just for damage; it's everyone's crit. And basically, chance means how often you're gonna crit, and magnitude means how strong the crit is gonna be, which you can just see over here. Basically, all of these stats are gonna. Well, I can show you right now. So this is how it looks if you have the regular stats. And if I pop it up and I use this, you can see that I have the artifact on. All of them will go up by 5%. Now, okay, one thing I also want to show you is I'm going to use my abilities, and I'm going to show you how much power over time I get at this point. So 1250, 1800, but that's a crit. 1240, 1250. 1270, so it's like 1200, almost 1300. If I put this at level 200 and I start using my stuff, it's a 1500, 1400, 1500. So it's more, but it's not that significant. And the reason for that being is part of the passive is after casting your group weapon buff, gain 3% vitalization per group member. Right now, I don't have any group members, so I don't get the extra vitalization. But if I have 7 other group members, that is 21% vit. So that's basically a fifth of your vitalization that just goes up. So I'd have about 25 to 26k vitalization, which is in turn also gonna enhance how much power you get. So this is not something you should use in alerts. This is a raid artifact. It just needs group members. Okay, so the Strategist card is one of those artifacts that you wouldn't think is a controller artifact, and it technically isn't a necessity, but I found playing around that it is kind of cool. Like you have possibilities to throw this into your loadout. You just have to work around it. Quickly to show you the stats at 120. Actually, I mean, it's not really 120, is it? What level is it right now? I mean, it's 139, which, okay, it hasn't broken through. You get 2% might, 2% dom, 2% resto, 2% precision, 2% vitalization, which is good. Because even though it is an artifact that works for all rolls, you still get 2% vitalization, which even the Claw of Elkhunt doesn't give you. So the stats on it are pretty good. And then you get 4 for everything at level 200. The main thing is at 120 you can use it as a power artifact. Like it'll give you the power heal critical, apply power over time. You don't need it at 160, so if you're doubting with that, you can just, like, it works at 120 basically. But at 160 you get like double the proc chance, which is something I would recommend if you're gonna get this artifact and you want to use it. you should at least get it to 160 because you need the double proc chance, because it doesn't proc all too often. I'm going to try to show that in a second. And then at 200 it gives the like a 30% potency, so it's going to do 30% more damage healing, but in our case power. Personally, I don't think it's necessary. If you want to have this artifact for trolling, 160 really is what you should be aiming for. You really just don't need it at 200. The only problem with this artifact is it barely procs. It is hella hard to proc. There's a couple of ways that you can make it. Basically, every time you get a power heal critical, you'll have a chance of applying power over time, which means that if you're a battle DPS, you can't just do this. You know, you can't just pump up precision damage and hope for a crit, because that's not, like, it's not gonna proc the power over time. You need a power heal, and the way to get power heals to proc is, one, you can have your group buff. You can hope that that crits, but the chance of that happening is pretty low. So basically, your power over time is going to be your only innate way to make it proc. And I'm just going to play around here. I'm just going to use abilities. Just going to wait for my power over time, and I'm going to show you that even at 120, it just barely procs. Now, once it does proc, you do get a ton of power for it. But as you can see, we've been doing this for what, half a minute? It hasn't procced a single other time. Yeah, I'm at this point, I'm just gonna give up. So yeah, at 120 it just doesn't do anything. I'm gonna chuck it in here at 160, and let's try this. Let's see if we can get it to proc. Let's give it like 30 seconds, sure. Let's see if in 30 seconds it can proc. The reason I'm spamming abilities is because for some reason I'm getting my power back, and if I have a full power bar, I'm not gaining power, so you know the artifact doesn't work. 10 more seconds. It seems that it's not gonna proc. Then again, we've barely had any crits. Okay, so it didn't proc. There's a couple of things about this artifact I'd like to explain. First of all, if you're a controller, you are gonna be using your hand blaster most likely, or your dual pistol, to keep up your own power bar. And out of all the testing I've done, it is not like you're not able to crit using this, which means that besides your power over time, you cannot use your weapon to try to get crit procs on the artifact, which is shitty. But there is other ways to, you know, get more crits or to get more procs. First of all, as I've just explained earlier, the Claw of Elkhunt. If you have it at if you have it at 200, you get that 5% critical chance and critical magnitude, but the magnitude's not all too important. Which means there's a 5% increased chance you crit, which means there is also just a higher chance that the artifact is gonna proc. That is one. Secondly, your BOP comlink, if you have it at, you don't even need to have it at 200. If you have 3 debuffs on the enemy and you're using you're using your attacks to proc the bird splits, it is actually possible that your strategist card is going to proc off of that. I've got it once in testing, and I've tested for about 10 to 15 minutes, so it is rare, but it is possible. So what I'm saying is, if you really want to use the strategist card to its fullest potential, you're gonna need either an extra kind of way to get power crits, meaning your bird splits, or you're gonna need increased critical chance in the form of your Claw of Elkhunt. Very complicated, but I mean, basically gives you the rundown. What I'm gonna do is, while I'm actually gonna give it like another 20 seconds, because I kind of want to show you how good the power proc actually is. So what I could do here, what I'm actually gonna do, is use that so that I have a higher chance of getting crits. Oh, tactical advantage, there we go. As you can see right there, we'll actually show it in a second. All right, so it's over. All right, let me actually get out of combat real quick. All right, so tactical advantage. Don't know where it where it started, but here we go. Wait, tactical advantage, 2k power, and that's not even a crit. So, oh no, it is a crit, 2k. Tactical advantage, it's also a crit. Actually, let me find. Okay, so about 1,300. So it's basically a smaller POT tick that's gonna add on to your total. So is it really worth a strategist card? No, but is it fun to experiment with other artifacts? Yeah. In the next part, I'm gonna go over combos, so you know which artifacts synergize with each other. All right, so the three combinations of artifacts that I've put together and I think could be viable. We're gonna start off with the easiest one. If you don't want to put a lot of XP into your artifacts, which I completely understand, in order to control or to troll, add a semi high combat rating, so you know up to date with the DLCs. At 120, you're looking at this combination of artifacts. When it comes to the stats themselves, that's pretty much the only reason you're going to use these. Your Amulet of Ra, cool, sure, it can debuff 3 enemies, and you get 3% extra strength on your debuffs, and your Parasite Power Harness, yeah, you get a bit of extra total power, a bit of extra precision, but all in all, it's not going to change you all too much. The big thing is that you're getting 8% vitalization for just 2 120 artifacts, which is huge. And then your Scrap the Soul Cloak, as I explained, if you don't have a lot of stats which you won't using like these kind of artifacts, it's always nice to have that Event Horizon or whatever supercharge you're using to get power back to your group. It's always good to have that as often as possible. So at 120, or you know, if you don't want to put a lot of artifact XP into this, I would recommend this. And if you don't even know in which order to go, I personally would get your Scrap of the Soul Cloak up first, then your Amulet of Ra, and then your Parasite Power Harness. For basically, if you know that your entire group has is a precision group, so this is more if you're running with league mates, and if you know, but you know that your group is running precision, which has kind of been nerfed, so this isn't going to happen all too often. But just in case, I would recommend this: the Claw of Elkhunt, the BOB comlink, and the Parasite Power Harness. Why? The Claw of Elkhunt is going to give, well, it's not going to give precision stats, but it's still going to buff the rest of the group up for dominance, restoration, and all that good stuff. And you're pretty much always going to have the precision buff up because you're constantly going to be using all your debuffs. Now this, I don't really recommend this anymore because, as I said, precision isn't great anymore. And the Claw of Elkhunt does mainly give that 7% might. But it still is a possibility. If you have these artifacts, you can try to play around with it, test it. Yeah, it's not the highest on my list, but it's possible. Okay, and then for basically, if you have a ton of artifact XP, and if you want to be experimental, again, like only if you want to be experimental, I think this could be the most fun way of using your artifacts. You would have a 200 strat card, a 200 Claw of Elkhunt, and a 200 Bob comlink. You can afford having the Claw of Elkhunt because you're going to have the Strategist card procs. You're going to have the Strategist card procs because you have the Claw of Elkhunt, which gives increased crit, and because you have the Blitz, the Bird's Blitz, which is also going to give you a higher chance of this proccing. So it synergizes really well together. On top of all of that, you're also going to get the huge buff that that the Claw of Elkhunt brings. So if you have these at 200, or if you can afford to get them at 200, I think this is your optimal 200 loadout for high level trolling. It also allows to battle troll because, I mean, I personally wouldn't recommend it, but if you're going to battle troll, these are most likely going to be the 3 artifacts, or at least a combination of these, maybe with some DPS artifacts that are going to give you the best possible battle troll loadout or build. All right, so this video was supposed to be very informative, but I realized that this is just not the kind of content I'm great at. I've talked a lot about these, but maybe it's not entirely clear how you should use them. I am going to make a video on hard light controlling, including like playstyle and including partially the artifacts. So if this isn't all too clear, go watch that video. But it was mainly intended to in-depth explain how these artifacts work and how they synergize together. I think that's going to be it for the video. If you do have any questions, because again, the explanation wasn't great, let me know, put them in the comments, and I'll try to react. If you do want to test stuff yourself, you can download the DCUO test server. I do recommend that if you're gonna get these high-level artifacts, because it allows you to really see how they would work at a high level. On the test server, you can pretty much have infinite XP. You don't have to spend any money. You can level everything up for free. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope this video was semi-informative. I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.